Who are the top MVP contenders so far this season? Stephen Curry, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Anthony Davis and Kawhi Leonard are all names you're likely to hear. Further down the pecking order, you might see the likes of Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, Kyle Lowry or Kevin Durant. Ask most experts and fans alike to keep rattling off names and you might hear 10 names before DeMar DeRozan. Here's why everyone is wrong for sleeping on DeRozan's hot start. Historic company. Entering this season, DeRozan ranked 16th in preseason MVP odds, after finishing in 11th in 2016-17 and 8th in 2017-18. Due in part to the change in scenery along with a switch to the mighty Western Conference, where wins are much harder to come by, it wasn't too much of a surprise to see DeRozan down among the likes of Donovan Mitchell, John Wall and Victor Oladipo. Sure, it's insanely early, but based on the historic precedent of what he's currently doing in San Antonio, DeRozan should be at least 10 spots higher. We always knew he could score. That he's averaging 27.3 points per game, which would match his career high set from 2016-17 in which he exploded out of the gates by dropping 30 in 10 of his first 12 games isn't a shock. That he's doing it while averaging more assists per game than 2/3 of the league's starting point guards and making over half of his shots, something which he's never done. Now that's a stunner. Just how rare is averaging 27 points and 6 assists per game on 50% shooting? It's only been done 12 times in the history of the league by 5 different players. The evolution of DeMar DeRozan. If anyone was going to drop 32 points, 14 assists and 8 rebounds in the Staples Center this season, the good money would be on LeBron James. Well, it wasn't James. Instead, it was DeRozan, who finished with a career-high 14 assists in the Spurs' thrilling win back on October 22. Here are all 14 of his assists, a mix of drive and kicks, transition bucks to trailers and nifty pick-and-roll dimes. Never his strong suit, DeRozan made strides last season as a playmaker, averaging a career-high 5.2 assists per game, after hovering just under 4.0 over his previous 4 seasons, which dated back to his first All-Star campaign in 2013-14. Now in his 10th season, he's made yet another leap almost out of necessity given San Antonio's sudden dearth of playmaking in the backcourt after the injury to DeJounte Murray, the retirement of Manu Ginobili and the departure of Tony Parker to Charlotte. Given LaMarcus Aldridge isn't exactly Nikola Jokic in terms of creating for others, that left DeRozan in the critical role of primary facilitator for a system known for ball movement and unselfishness, a role that not even San Antonio knew he would play when they made the deal with Toronto. The Spurs rank in the middle of the pack in terms of potential assists per game, not bad considering the current roster makeup. Leading the way is DeRozan as the Spurs are attempting 10.7 shots per game off his passes, nearly 5 more than off of passes from any other player. It's also not far off from the likes of Jokic, 11.2, and Draymond Green, 11.5, 2 of the best playmakers in the league. More so than the scoring and efficiency, the passing has unlocked a new layer to DeRozan's game which allows him to be far more than simply an elite bucket getter. Better than Kawhi. All things being equal, you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone that thinks DeRozan is overall a better player than Leonard. However, at least in the early going you can certainly make the case that DeRozan has been better this season, not to be taken lightly given Leonard himself is perhaps in the early stages of his own career year. Obviously, DeRozan is not in Leonard's class when it comes to the defensive end of the floor. That's not a path anyone should ever venture down. But you could make the case that DeRozan's availability more than makes up for it. That's no knock on Leonard, who is still getting back to his former self and has the luxury of easing back into a full workload on a talented team more than capable of holding down the fort in his absence. Context matters, and while it's unfair to knock Leonard for taking a big-picture view and putting himself in position to succeed in May and June, it's certainly okay to give DeRozan credit for playing nearly 37 minutes a game and shouldering the burden for San Antonio every single night. The Spurs desperately need DeRozan to sustain much of anything on offense, as they have an offensive rating of 113.0 with him on the floor and 102.0 with him off, essentially the difference between the 6th and 29th ranked offenses. If they're going to make their 22nd consecutive postseason appearance, a thought which seemed perilously in danger after losing Dejounte Murray, they need their franchise player on the floor. That alone might be enough to swing the pendulum in favor of DeRozan in any conversation about who has been more valuable thus far. When it comes to picking your MVP narrative, everyone loves the shiny new toy with a good story or the return to prominence by an all-time great. But as you consider the arguments for Antetokounmpo, Davis, Curry or any other top talent, don't sleep on the long-time Toronto staple now making a statement in the Lone Star State.